It's a new year. Happy New Year 2026. I hope you had a great 2025. I hope 2026 is even better. I hope you had a break. I had a break. I had a 2-week break. It was very nice. I didn't do much. Played a lot of video games. Went to Yokohama. Went to the Ramen Museum. So if you're watching on the video, you will notice I have a very sexy ramen-based shirt on. A new year has not brought peace to the world, though, and the ongoing kerfuffle between China and Japan is ongoing. I mean, that's kind of what the ongoing part means. China's biggest Comic-Con banned anime and manga and related cosplay. So you got to think like in a Comic-Con, surely it could be like all Marvel stuff. I think if you were in the West, it actually could be understandable that a lot of it would be Marvel products, DC, Western things. But if you hit Asia, I think there's almost an expectation that the biggest anime, the biggest cosplays are going to be from Japanese franchises. But because the government is now angry and they don't want any sort of cultural input from Japan, they're now trying to punish everybody. But I think, again, I said this when they started canceling concerts and stuff. They're punishing the Chinese people who are fans of this Japanese stuff because they've paid for this. They want to go to this. They want to see this. They've decided that it would be the new Chinese style only, but that wasn't actually explained what that means. So Chinese style cosplay, Chinese comics, Chinese characters, like they didn't explain what was acceptable, and that's what becomes problematic because then you have to guess what's acceptable, and then you go to the door and they're like, no, your cosplay is too Japanese, not Chinese enough, you're not allowed in. A lot of fan-created art, and a lot of the fan-created art, so they sell these like books and stuff, and those are fan-made books, usually based on existing titles. Those existing titles might be Japanese, which means they can't sell these things at this place. They're talking about a massive amount of cancellations. A lot of people just not showing up this year because they've taken away what probably is the core element of the actual event, which is the love of anime and manga. That said, China's government's also taken on travel. They've said directly to travel agencies they want to reduce Japan-bound visitors by 40%. I'd be very interested to know how they got to that number specifically. Like, why specifically 40%? Why not 50%? Why not 100%? It's the Chinese government. They have sort of large powers in what they can and cannot do. I guess there's a certain amount of trade that must happen, maybe traveling that has to happen. But in China, if you want to get a visa to go to Japan, you actually have to go through an approved travel agency to get the visa. This means that these companies can now make it harder for you to get a visa to actually go to Japan, reducing the amount of thing. But as they've actually said in the last month in December, the amount of tourists, not necessarily Chinese tourists, but the amount of tourists overall in Japan has increased. So it was October, November, December, up, 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 even though all the government was saying, do not come. In December, there were 1,900 flight cancellations, and in January, there have been 2,195 flight cancellations. So that's that many people, that many airplanes no longer bringing Chinese tourists, but that number seems to be made up immediately by tourists from other countries. So Japan, yes, they're not getting those Chinese numbers, they're not getting that Chinese money, but they do seem to be making up immediately from other places, which is what I believe the Prime Minister or President of Malaysia said would happen. So I guess don't worry about it. Pokemon Sleep is an app. I actually tried it. I actually didn't mind it collecting my information about me sleeping. It's one of those sleep apps that you put your phone next to your bed and it records like anytime you groan or roll over or fart. And then it like tries to calculate how much time you spent in deep sleep and how much time you slept overall. Like the quality, try to give you the quality of your sleep. I found it annoying because it tried to get me to play a game during the day when I was actually busy. So I get up, I have a very busy morning. I got to take care of Dave. I got to go to work. I got to do a bunch of stuff. So I didn't want to be catching Pokemon on my phone at work. It would have been fine later in the day, but it was basically after you wake up, it started annoying you immediately. So I only used the app for about 2 or 3 days before I deleted it because I'm sorry, I actually wanted the information, not the gamification. You should have given me an option to turn the game off and just get the information, or maybe I should just use a different app. But this is one of my students actually recommended to me, so I was willing to give it a try. It says weekday versus weekend sleep pattern disparity, which they are calling the social jet lag, which I first thought was a really dumb name, but whatever. They're saying that this is costing Japan 1 trillion yen loss in productivity, which I don't know how that actually is true. Because this pattern of sleep has been in play for decades, generations, no less. How can you say it's actually costing you any money if it's just the status quo? So they could say there is a possibility of an increase in productivity if sleep patterns are corrected. Something like that. I think that's more fair. When you have a negative state becomes normal, that is your normal state. You're not losing that money. You just have the potential gain if you fix this situation. There were 28 million downloads of Pokemon Sleep. They had 80,000 domestic users, so that's 80,000 Japanese users between the ages of 18 and 66. Number 1 on the scale is healthy sleep, all the way down to 5, which is the jet lag, social jet lag sleep. 16% of people fell into that 5th category of social jet lag. And what they're saying is people don't sleep enough during the week, and then they hit the weekend and they sleep extra, but it doesn't sort of make up the deficit like people think it does. So like, I sleep 5 hours a night every night during the week, but then I sleep like 10, 15 hours on the 2 days of the weekend. That should make up the difference. That's not how your body works. They're saying if you could add a consistent 30-minute increase to the quality of your sleep every day, as opposed to sleeping in late on the weekend, that would be a much bigger improvement. But that information hasn't gone out to anyone. How do you actually tell that to people and make them believe it? I don't know. So I think that 1 trillion yen they're claiming is a loss is going to continue to be a loss. So since it doesn't exist in the past and it's not going to exist in the future, I think nothing's happened. So in Nagoya, there's a statue of a guy named Toyotomi Hideyoshi. And it was beheaded not too long ago. It's like a old samurai-looking dude, and he's sitting cross-legged. He looks pretty pleasant, actually. And he's credited for making Nagoya the city it is, which is not a very impressive city, because you probably have never even really heard of it. A lot of people have maybe heard the name, but they were like, I don't know where it is in Japan. I don't know. It's the 3rd biggest city. And you have Tokyo as like the international hub. It's the city that everybody knows. And then you have Osaka, which is like, if like, oh, you don't want to go to Tokyo, you go to Osaka. And then you have Nagoya, which no one would go to voluntarily. It's a business place. People work there, they live there. It's not very exciting to visit, but it's not bad. I live very close to Nagoya. I actually think it's a great place to live. I don't think I would recommend visiting it, if I'm being really honest. There's not a lot to see here. So this guy was credited with making Nagoya the boring city it is. But who's going to bother beheading this guy? That's actually a really interesting question. Well, they found out what happened was a drunk cop from another city on a business trip went and found the statue and twisted the head until it broke at the neck. I was really impressed by that. Either that is an incredibly strong cop, which is kind of what you want your cops to be, or that is an incredibly weak statue. And it turns out I think it might be the latter. It's probably a bit of both, but it's an incredibly weak statue because the statue isn't bronze or metal. It is a reinforced plastic, which is almost like a trick. If I was a dead shogunate or samurai or something, and they were going to make a statue of me, I absolutely would not want them to make it out of plastic. Like, you may make my statue out of bronze, or carve it out of wood, like make it a proper statue, something like that. This reinforced plastic stuff isn't for me. Let's just put it that way, because then some drunk cop's going to come twist my head off, but the head hadn't come off yet. It had broken at the neck. 4 days later, a different drunk man walked up and started kicking the head until the head came off. So this statue is getting abused for some reason. So I don't know if there's some sort of history there that I don't understand, if there's some sort of connection to anger local drunk people, or if it's just drunk people being drunk people, which I'm far more likely to believe that's just the way it is. Both these guys are being questioned at the moment. They're both under arrest. I think they did it, and I think the cameras are going to prove it. And I'm interested, how much would you have to pay to repair a plastic statue, or are you going to take the time to actually make a better statue? So it's the new year, as I said at the beginning. The Emperor of Japan, he comes out and he does what like royal people kind of do who don't have any actual power. He says some innocuous, very pleasant things about peace and the future and prosperity and let's do our best and make the world a better place. And I don't have to work, so I'm happy. You should be happy too, that kind of thing. Basically, he makes a series of non-offensive positive statements about the upcoming new year. Year of the Horse, which means we can clip clop into our futures. Yeah? It's for some reason, a guy in the front row gets up, strips off his clothes, and he gets over the barrier and starts making a run for the emperor. Not in a violent way. This is more of a streaking situation. The police, he didn't get anywhere close to the emperor. The police grab him as soon as he's over the barrier, wrap him in a blanket, which they had ready. So they have two kinds of blankets. So they have just regular blankets, which are blankets to provide a little bit of warmth. But they also have these sort of very heavy blankets that they push violent people into and then wrap them up so they can't fight back. It's like a non-violent way of containing an angry person. And I've seen it used once, not in real life, on the internet. I've seen it used once. And it was very interesting because not only are you like angry, but now you're angry and you've been made into like a burrito and you can't escape it. It's anger and humiliation would creep in at the same time. It was a very interesting thing to see that happen. So they just wrapped this guy and took him off. Nothing actually happened, but it turns out this guy had announced on social media, which I think is X, that he was going to do this, that he was going to go see the emperor's speech, take off all his clothes, and streak in front of the emperor. I'm betting the police saw that or knew about it, which is why they had that blanket ready, just the regular blanket. And then they just had him like taken care of right away. They couldn't actually stop him until he did something. So they had to wait for him to start stripping down and get over the barrier before they could catch him. I bet it was easier to catch him once he was past the barrier, which is why he got that far. Because I bet they could have jumped over the barrier and kind of kept him in the audience. If you're going to streak, don't announce it. Like, don't. That's just a given. But as a kid in his 20s, he's been arrested. I'm interested to see, because normally, again, I would have chalked this up to being like drunk, but this was premeditated. He announced it in advance and then went to the speech. He knew he was going to do this. This was a plan. I am interested in why he did the plan. So the top young adult comic in Comic Moa, so it's C''MOA, which is Japan's largest ebook store, is called My Dear Wife, Will You Be My Lover? It's about a couple who's sort of lost to their mojo and they're trying to get their mojo back, kind of get the groove back, trying to get the love back in the marriage. I could take my tone down a notch and talk deep into the microphone and pretend this is like a late night show where I'm talking about, hey, you're a couple, you've been together, you love each other. It's time to get it back, baby. Get it back in deep. It's basically a little sexy comic. So they have like their daily life and then they do it. And then they have their daily life where they're like, oh no, we did it. And then they do it again. I haven't read it, but that seems to be what it's basically about. The art, it's been reviewed at 3.1 stars out of 5. It's been reviewed as being relatively bland. The art style is very boring. The story is very weak. It has particularly high quality sexy bits, which I think is why it's selling. There are 4 books in the series, all released at the same time. How did this author get all 4 books out at once so quickly, so immediately? Well, it's because it was done by AI. So this has sparked the conversation of the most popular book on this comic website is an AI-generated book. The story it's generated is really bland and boring. The sexy bits are very good because it's probably learned from the internet how to make very good sexy bits. What do you do with that? It's a very interesting question because I think this is the reality of AI content going forward, is it's always going to be relatively bland because it's only iterative. It's not ingenious or new. It can only iterate on things that's come before. I've actually had this conversation before. Don't think I want to get too into it now. AI is always going to end up being middle of the road, boring, bland, mediocre, despite the fact it takes so much energy to create whatever it's creating. So your 3.1 star story and art is, to me now, like, that's a very clear indication of AI as the highest peak quality it'll ever get. I don't think AI is ever going to actually surprise and delight people in any real way. It's not like I'm not worried about it taking over everything, because an article I read this morning was like 2026 is the year that AI like destroys millions of jobs and puts like countries into recessions and stuff. So that's not fun to think about. But at the same time, it's also not very good at anything. Like, despite all the information you put in and all this stuff, I think it's basically good at getting information and giving it back to you, not actually coming up with ideas or anything. So that might be the saving grace of humanity, is that we at least can surprise each other. There was a program called Match. There was a program called Match, and this is watch matching, kind of like a dating website, like a watch match website. And so what you could do is I would have my super cool expensive watch, my Rolex, let's say, and I can give it to these guys, and they would essentially rent it out to other people. It would get passed around, and I would get money for it, and then eventually get my money back, plus my watch. It turns out it was a massive scam. I mean, it's not a really big surprise. You should not be giving your expensive watches to people. It's not a terrible idea, and I actually think the business model itself could have worked, but there were 2 people arrested now. This actually happened back in 2021 to 2023, but the 2 guys mostly responsible for this disappeared and went to the Dubai, United Arab Emirates. They went to the Middle East to escape arrest. Well, one of them came back and was arrested at the airport, which does beg the question to me of, why did you come back? You were basically scot-free in the Middle East. You had enough money that you'd stolen to live there for an extended period. Why did you come back to Japan? Or go somewhere else? I don't know. The original arrest is the result of when these 2 guys befriended a man in his 30s and got... Oh, God damn it. It just all fell apart just now. This all started when they befriended a man in his 30s, and they convinced him to give them 15 of his watches worth 18 million yen. Now, I have 5 watches, and the sum total doesn't even break 100,000 yen of my watches. Most of my watches are like 5,000 yen. I have one very sexy watch that's like 90,000 yen. That's it. Like, we don't break big numbers over here. I'm not making that kind of money. This was in August of 2023. Now, he figured out pretty quickly that he wasn't getting his watches back, and he wasn't getting any money. So he's like, hey, can you give me some money because you got my watches? And they're like, yeah, it's in the mail, whatever. I don't know how they agreed to do it. The money never showed up. And he's like, I want my watches back. And they're like, what watches? And then they just disappeared. This all began in January 2021. They got 650 people to give between the ages of 28 to 80 to give them 1,700 watches worth 2.8 billion yen. So they convinced 650 people to give up their really expensive watches to get 2 billion yens, almost 3 billion yens worth of money. Of the 1,700, they just straight up sold 1,300 of them at 110 different shops. So these guys have arrest warrants in 45 different prefectures in Japan. I think there's 47 total. That's just off the top of my head. I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments if I was wrong. So basically, almost every prefecture in Japan has an arrest warrant out for these guys now. They took the money and they bought crypto and went to online casinos. 2.8 billion yen. And you buy crypto and you go gamble it away and you just lose it. Like, you don't need more than 2 billion yen to live. Like, you could just live for the rest of your life. It's maybe modest because you want to make sure that you always have enough money for the future. But no, it's not even modest. You could live a luxurious life for the rest of your life with 2 billion yen. It's ridiculous that these guys then wasted it all. This is the part that maybe pisses me off about criminals, is they get the money and then they waste the money. They waste the opportunity to just live a really good life. One was arrested as he returned from the United Arab Emirates, where he had fled to escape the arrest. That happened last week. So I'd be very interested to see how much trouble they get into. There's no way these victims are getting their money back or their watches. I mean, all that's probably just gone. So what kind of punishment happens? Do these guys have to, over the rest of their lifetime, pay back money? I doubt it's going to work out that way. But it also means there's like 600-700 stolen watches in circulation in Japan right now. professional caddy, a married caddy. He was married to a professional golfer. He was having extramarital affairs with 3 other professional golfers. Now, I don't know, I'm a little stuck and like, I couldn't manage 4 relationships in one go. It's just too stressful for me. But he's I guess a caddy's, the whole point is to be an organization, detail oriented, that kind of thing. I don't know. He's facing a 9-year suspension, and the 3 women are getting severe warnings. Now, I thought that was interesting because usually it's the guy gets off in Japan and the women just sort of get punished or disappear or whatever. But if it's the women's professional, like the Japanese PGA, they now are facing the potential loss of 4 golfers all in one go. I don't know how many professional female Japanese golfers there are, but I'm betting there's also not that many. Like not enough that you could actually lose 4 and it wouldn't have some sort of impact on your year. So I think that actually might be a big consideration as to why these women are not being punished to any sort of real degree. They're getting severe warnings. The association had taken into consideration a comprehensive range of circumstances, like we can't lose 4 players all in one go. The wife had previously complained that her husband was having extramarital affairs with other professional golfers. The person she was speaking to, like a representative of the Japanese ladies PGA, said, it's an inside joke, but they say that any girl who dates your husband will win their first tournament. So she's saying, like, I have a very serious concern that my husband is conducting extramarital affairs with other golfers in this league, and that's problematic. And this guy's like, you know what they say? They say if you bang your husband, you're going to win a tournament. Like, it's a funny, cool thing to do, which to me is very old school. Again, when I think of golf, I think of old Japanese men, so I'm thinking of old Japanese men's attitudes. And this, they would not see a problem with this guy getting it on with like as many girls as he possibly can. Then tabloids started reporting about the extramarital affairs, and then the association started taking this very seriously and doing investigations, and that's when the 9-year suspension came down. But the fact is, if they hadn't been exposed, they would have been absolutely fine with it going forward, because this is old school Japanese thinking. A cop has been fired. Now, I was about to say arrested, but he hasn't been arrested, even though he should have been arrested. His crime has been, for the last 7 years, he's been visiting soaplands and then basically using his authority as a police officer to not pay for it. Now, a soapland, for those of you who don't know, in this case, is a sauna. So they have different kinds. There's ones where you go and a lady will wash your body and she'll be naked and you'll be naked. And if something happens, oops. This one specifically was a sauna where you have an attendant who is a woman, and you're not paying for the attendant to have sex with you, but it is very possible that that actually might happen. This was to try to get around prostitution laws. So you're not paying for sex with the person, you're paying for an attendant to join you in the sauna, let's say. In that way, it's not prostitution. She just happens to really like this customer, and then they consensually have relations in the sauna, I assume. I hope someone is cleaning that sauna with bleach every hour. They say he went more than 100 times for free, threatening, you could be arrested at any time, right? So he had, 7 years ago, fomented a relationship with the owner of the soapland. And basically, like, when they first hung out, the first thing he said was, I'd like to hang out with you sometime. I'll tell you right away. I like short girls with big eyes. Bad breath is a big no-no. So this guy knew what he was doing. He was using his authority to get his stuff for free. He was doing the stuff that he was not supposed to be doing. And then instead of getting arrested, because I think you should be arrested for this, he was then he was warned, and then he resigned. And yeah, I think those last 2 stories tell you a lot about how the world works. I feel that was a real downer for the very first episode of the new year. I actually should have ended on a high note, but I always put the sexy, dirty stuff at the end. So here we are, the beginning of 2026. The end of every Ninja News Japan episode. Dirty, dirty stories. Because you're a dirty, dirty boy, dirty, dirty girl, I didn't plan this ending out. Hopefully, you've learned something. If you get 2.8 billion yen, don't spend it on crypto and online casinos. I hope you have a very good 2026, year of the horse. I loved you last year. I still love you this year. And I hope I can love you into the future. Not like that caddy, though, just so we're clear.